the end of 2024, Square Enix released arguably one of their biggest sleeper hits of recent years, Fantasian Neo Dimension, an enhanced port of Final Fantasy creator Hironobu Sakaguchi's latest game for PlayStation 5, Xbox Series, Switch and PC. It marks their first partnership in 20 years, which is a pretty big deal if you're a JRPG fan. However, outside of this iconic legacy, is Fantasian Neo Dimension a great game? Anyway, thank you to Square Enix for sending me a code for the Steam Deck version to check out. I have a lot to say on this game. Let's get straight into it. I'm going to start with a confession. If you've seen the thumbnail for this video, you'll be wondering something important. Why is Fantasian your first classic Final Fantasy style game, Milla, considering how much a massive JRPG fan you are? Well, I talked more about this in my 10 classic RPGs I still need to play video from ages ago. However, for the benefit of newcomers, and there's a lot of you, I'll explain here. Get your popcorn out, it's story time! Throughout the 2000s and 2010s, Square Enix tried to appeal to Western gamers instead of the RPG fanbase that built them up in the 1990s and 2000s. Their relationship with Hironobu Sakaguchi soured in the early 2000s. Sakaguchi left Square Enix to form Mistwalker, based in Honolulu, Hawaii. Over time, Mistwalker developed a slew of console titles for other companies, such as the Blue Dragon series and The Last Story for the Wii, before a handful of mobile titles in the 2010s you can no longer play. As for me personally, I was a huge Dragon Quest fan back then, and I still am today. Dragon Quest IX on Nintendo DS was one of my most treasured childhood experiences, and I was looking forward to playing all those Dragon Quest games that Square Enix was surely going to bring and localise on the Nintendo 3DS. This did not happen. I was extremely bitter towards Square Enix back then for many years. However, I did get into Kingdom Hearts with Dream Drop Distance on the 3DS, which was an awesome game in its own right. Subsequently, I moved over to other JRPG developers for my role-playing fix on the Nintendo 3DS. This is how I became an Atlus fan, as I hugely supported the 3DS outside of Japan with the likes of Etrian Odyssey, Shin Megami Tensei, a bunch of third-party localizations, and so much more. Other companies like Falcom and Compile Heart drifted onto my radar once I got a PlayStation Vita. All those classic Square Enix titles, like Final Fantasy VII, drifted further down my priority list, with my time moving towards other series like Persona, Trails, and in one of my biggest wastes of time, Neptunia. As time went on, I moved past my childhood business, which wasn't grounded in the reality of localization, which you can probably guess when you don't know much about the video game industry. I even made a full 1-hour video discussing all those Dragon Quest 3DS games a couple of years ago, including why Square Enix chose not to localize them, which has done really well on the channel by the way, thank you so much. Moreover, I've become more experienced with RPGs and content creation in general, therefore I aim to rectify my gaming wrongs by playing through all these classic games I missed. Lots of my fellow gaming content creators online have played classic Final Fantasy and discussed them, whether they enjoy them or not. Because I've not played them, I have nothing to contribute, even though I really want to. It's kinda like FOMO, but from a credibility and discourse perspective, not a consumerist one. I don't really feel this with visual novels to a strong extent, even though I've missed out on many classics in that genre too, such as most key titles. This is why in 2023 I played Chrono Trigger for the first time, which now ranks highly among my favourite RPGs ever. I did also try Final Fantasy X. While I liked what I played, it felt like a huge chore because of all the unskippable cutscenes, so I dropped it. It's peak early 2000s Square Enix in that regard. I do want to try Final Fantasy X again someday though, because I've come to appreciate the jankiness of retro RPGs a lot more recently. This is also partly why I started Chrono Cross, which I'll also be going back to some point this year, which I've also heard is quite like the PS1 era Final Fantasy titles, but I digress. This brings me on to Fantasian Neo Dimension. When the opportunity to review this game arose, I'd figured now is the chance to try the classic Final Fantasy style RPG again. Even when Mistwalker first published this title on Apple Arcade in 2021, I wanted to try out this game if it ever came to consoles. Critical reception for Fantasian was very positive, with RPG Site even naming it their 2021 Game of the Year. But given it was an Apple Arcade exclusive, almost nobody played it. I will not fault Mistwalker for launching it exclusively on Apple Arcade. Like all small independent studios, Mistwalker has got to do what they need to survive. Apple likely offered Mistwalker money in exchange for Apple Arcade exclusivity, because they wanted a classic JRPG on their platform, which from the perspective of a platform holder is a pretty reasonable request. However, most JRPG fans do not play on mobile devices. This is why demand for a console port of Fantasian existed right from its initial announcement. Mistwalker and Square Enix both know this. Therefore, they approached Fantasian Neo Dimension as a brand new title in its marketing. My approach to playing Fantasian Neo Dimension was, if I like Fantasian, surely I'll like the classic Final Fantasy games as well, and spoiler alert, I like Fantasian. Fantasian tells the story of Leo, a young man who develops amnesia after he's mysteriously ejected from a world of machines. Leo sets off to recover his memories while discovering the truth about the world. He soon meets a diverse range of characters, such as Kina, a young woman who accompanies Leo at the start of his journey. She is the daughter of a mysterious fortune teller and has a mysterious past of her own. Other characters include 2 mysterious robots that accompany Leo in the prologue, and when you meet them again later in the story, join him on his quest. Fantasian's story significantly expands from its initial premise. As time goes on, Leo and his allies discover the world's secrets, meet more allies, explore new areas, and unlock his ship and later headquarters. The best way I can describe Fantasian's story overall is that it's split into 2 distinctive halves, which reflects the way the game was originally released on the Apple Arcade. The shortcomings of one half are overpowered by the strengths of the other, and vice versa, to produce a overall very satisfying experience. Fantasian story content combines tried and tested JRPG tropes with original storytelling plot devices. Some of these plot twists I predicted from a mile away, however others genuinely blew my mind. But one thing these have in common is, regardless of how predictable the plot points are, they are all well presented and well paced. The choreography and new voice acting, combined with the hand-drawn backgrounds for the text-based visual novel-esque segments, greatly helped increase these scenes' emotional impact. I really enjoyed watching these scenes. As for how Fantasian's story is told, I touched this a little bit earlier, but let's talk about it a little more. The first half of Fantasian's story is very linear. You know exactly where you're going, and the game makes it very clear, whereas Fantasian's second half is the precise opposite. You can access most of the world map from the beginning, especially once you get your ship. However, you must complete certain objectives first to enter other places. It's quite ambiguous, and you will often need a walkthrough because some of them are not exactly clear. However, I love that Fantasian gives you the freedom to start and finish multiple objectives at once. If you can't defeat a certain difficult boss or lack the party member with the right skills or equipment, you can come back to this boss later and work on clearing other objectives. The open-ended structure also means you begin to decipher the rest of Fantasian's story and world building in a different order to other people. It's really unique. All the remaining various plot points are resolved slowly and in a very satisfying way. Fantasian's second act reminds me a lot of Dragon Quest XI's Act 3, which I absolutely loved. That was similarly open-ended. One of Fantasian's most unique selling points is the presentation. Nobuo Uematsu returned to compose the soundtrack for Fantasian. This might be his final complete RPG soundtrack. The music is well done, with a wide variety of tunes that perfectly fit the atmosphere. There's a separate OST release in Japan for this game, which I may pick up someday, if Fantasian does end up being Nobuo Uematsu's last full soundtrack for a video game. It's a fantastic send-off. Interestingly, Neo Dimension features the option to change the battle tracks to tracks from select Final Fantasy titles, such as the Pixel remasters, Final Fantasy 16, and both Final Fantasy 7 remakes. This is a really nice touch, and you can clearly tell that Square Enix and Mistwalker knew their audience for this game. The main star of the show, though, are its dioramas. Every area within Fantasian is based on real-world, handmade dioramas made exclusively for this title. Every field, town, dungeon, and overworld, including the world map, are all made from scratch. These dioramas are further enhanced using technology to add effects once they're ported into the game, such as waves for the ocean, or lights for homes, or mist. There's so many different types of effects, and it's something you've really got to experience for yourself. Few video games utilise dioramas in this way, yet this unique presentation makes Fantasian stand out. It's like how Aardman Animations uses clay motion, something rare in the world of animation, for Wallace and Gromit, which if you've seen anything from that company, you will know how memorable they are. When you pause the game to view the full map, you see the original diorama in the pause menu. This is how Fantasian makes every area and environment feel fresh. It's a genuine technical marvel, and it's really interesting seeing the original diorama and the effects added side by side in the game. One new feature added to Neo Dimension is full voice acting for the cast, with both English and Japanese audio. I found the English dub a bit too Americanized for my taste, so I changed over to the Japanese audio pretty quickly. It's certainly far from the worst dub in the world, so if you need English audio for accessibility or any other reasons, the voiceover here will do just fine. Now, one thing worth adding is there was initially resistance from the development team to add in audio. as they wanted the game to be closer to the old school Final Fantasies in its presentation style. However, I am very glad that they ultimately relented, because the audio in the cutscenes further helps improve the delivery and builds an even more gripping story, something which I touched on earlier. Gameplay wise, Fantasian is your typical turn-based RPG. You walk around the world map, enter random battles, and have to work out how to progress the story yourself. As mentioned before, Fantasian's gameplay is directly compared to old school Final Fantasy games on the PlayStation 1. As its battle system is familiar to anyone familiar with turn-based RPGs, I'm only going to outline the new features that makes Fantasian's battle system and gameplay stand out. First of all, players can aim certain attacks at enemies with curveballs, allowing them to either get around or even attack lots of enemies in wide arcs. One character, Ez, not only has this skill for his default weapon, but also has item-based skills, allowing him to buff your allies and attack enemies by crafting items on the fly based on things you can buy in shops. This is why he is Fantasian's best and most broken party member. Moreover, he's essential for clearing the hard battles in the game, especially in the Dimension, which we'll come back to in a bit. Another key to winning Fantasian's battles is swapping party members in and out to defeat enemies with their strengths and weaknesses, or using certain skills, such as Arrow Rain. Fantasian's signature addition though is the Dimension system. This allows you to store up enemy encounters in order to fight them all at once in one fell swoop. This is great for accessibility and reducing grinding, because Fantasian takes a bit less time to complete than other games that often require you to grind a lot. I would like to have seen an option to split the larger Dimension battles into two though. When you're trying to grind and defeat 40 enemies in a row, it can be really challenging because they don't really stop spawning until they're out of enemies. If you die, you lose all of your progress, so you need to be by a save point when you use the Dimension. Speaking of challenging, Fantasian is a really hard game. The original Apple Arcade release is notorious for being extremely difficult. To address this, Neo Dimension adds a new, easier difficulty setting, confusingly called Normal. It's kind of like how Nintendo messed up the difficulty for Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn during that game's localization. In this case, it's kind of similar, but also not. The easy mode is what's called the normal difficulty setting within Fantasian. This game lacks a true easy difficulty setting, which is something I believe this game needs to become even more accessible to more players. Difficulty aside, Fantasian is a game that requires a walkthrough, especially for boss encounters deep into the game. You often need to equip certain jewels to disable status effects, increase defense, and know what skills to use against what enemies and when. Progressing through or even unlocking certain areas is also difficult at times. Fantasian doesn't make it clear what you need to do. Unlocking a certain wormhole dungeon comes to mind here, which, had I not been reviewing the game, I might have actually dropped the game at this point because it was frustrating me so much. This makes Fantasian frustrating because requiring a walkthrough or having a specific setup for a boss in advance is something that a lot of people, especially more casual gamers and younger gamers, are not really into because it's frustrating, really difficult to vibe with. As it stands, I can't recommend Fantasian for people new to RPGs for this reason. However, for experienced players looking for a challenge or to experience older style RPGs with a modern coat of paint, Fantasian is a great pick. Moreover, Fantasian is a very lengthy game. Completing the main story of Fantasian takes around 30 to 40 hours. Completing everything, including all of the objectives, all of the side quests, takes upward of 60 hours. Given how the boundaries between optional and compulsory content frequently blur, Fantasian will take so much longer than you think. Otherwise known as why this video has taken so much longer than I thought. Another criticism I've seen is that Fantasian doesn't justify its full price tag. They criticise Fantasian for looking cheap because of its mobile origins, which is partly why people say it's not worth 50 quid. I think this is unfair, not just because of Mistwalkers' circumstances as I've outlined earlier, but also because, as was already clear, Fantasian Neo Dimension is a full price re-release of a console gaming experience that happens to have originated on mobile due to factors outside of Mistwalkers' control. Moreover, there is a physical copy, making Fantasian Neo Dimension perfect for collectors. From the perspective of a console gamer or PC gamer waiting for a console version to play on their preferred device and or collect physically, Fantasian Neo Dimension is exactly what we've been waiting for. The same also applies to PC gamers looking to play Fantasian on Steam. Many of the usual Steam features like achievements, trading cards and family sharing are all present. There's also full Steam Deck support, which this Steam Deck enthusiast approves of. There are some criticisms that I do think are fair though. Some remnants of these mobile origins remain, such as the user interface, which, okay, I think that does look pretty cheap and it would be nice to have seen that revamped. Also, the Nintendo Switch version has performance issues from what I've read online, which I do believe is a fair criticism, and this affects a lot of third-party Switch ports at the moment. Therefore, if you're interested in Fantasian, you may want to consider picking it up on other formats. Wrapping up my thoughts on Fantasian Neo Dimension now, especially with its legacy, starting with Square Enix, Fantasian Neo Dimension marks the return of a positive relationship with Hironobu Sakaguchi. Sakaguchi became a massive fan of Final Fantasy XIV, and this is how their relationship started to improve. And to be fair, if you've played Final Fantasy XIV, you're probably a huge fan of the game too. I've not played it, so I wouldn't know. Who knows what the future holds between each party? If nothing else, this goes to show that sometimes the breakdown of a relationship may not be final. Likewise, a reunion may not actually be a fantasy, after all. Personally, I'm pleased I got the opportunity to check out this game. I felt for a long time that I'm long overdue to check out some more classic RPGs. Fantasian Neo Dimension both satisfies that itch, however, it also leaves me craving more. Maybe I'll get around to the likes of Final Fantasy VII sooner than I've anticipated. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video, and thanks again to Square Enix for sending me a code so I could check this game out. Please like, comment, subscribe, algorithm boosting stuff, consider becoming a channel member if you want to and can afford to do so. Thank you so much everybody, have a lovely day, bye bye.